Oh, good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. You guys caught me in the middle of some, I don't know, early Halloween meditation. Got my handy dandy little voodoo doll here, and yeah, we'll just get back to this later. Hey, there's my boy Germ and my boy Freddie. What is going on, Germ? We really enjoy coming out to Amory, Mississippi this weekend. Loved hanging out with you guys, getting to know all you guys a little bit better. All you guys from real pop culture and Kill J, of course. Everybody knows Kill J. It's near and dear to my heart because we play that jam on the Edge Radio US. Yes, happy October. Vampire Christmas is here. I'm so excited. The decorations are already up, or, at least a good head start. We're not quite finished yet because, there's just so much more stuff I want to get out there for right now. But we got the ghosts up there, and we got the skeletons and the Jason hockey mask, and yeah, all that cool stuff. That's it. AuthorLynnGibson.com. There's my boy Gavin jumping on board. I was doing a little meditation there at the beginning of the show, had my handy dandy voodoo doll out, and was just doing a little contemplation. But yeah, like I said, we will get back with that a little bit later on, maybe after the show when there are no witnesses. Also, got to give a shout out. If you're anywhere near the Mississippi Gulf Coast, come take a ride out. It is Cruising the Coast week this week, so there's going to be all kind of cool classic cars and hot rods running up and down the highway there on the beach, and we will also be there with the Adrian's Fury Dragster at the Bow Tie Blowout. If you got a bow tie, you need to be there. Jezebel's going to be there. I'm not sure that she's going to be entered in any contest because, yeah, I just didn't get a chance to detail her up and make her look all pretty and clean and all that good stuff. But she will be there in her full glory along with me and Big Johnny Blender. And like I said, the Adrian's Fury Dragster. So come on out and hang with us for a little while. There's going to be all kind of crazy stuff going on out there. Derek Ladner and Wade Cuevas have done a very good job at organizing, putting this thing together. So come on out, ride by for a little while. We'll be there from 1 to 6. You won't have any trouble finding us. Just look for a big 1-ton truck with a red trailer and a huge crowd gathered around a badass dragster. You found us. That's us right there. All right. Also, got to get rolling with my shout-outs for the Adrian's Fury Dragster, which are Surreal Studios, D&M Graphics, Renegade Racing Fuel, Canon Filters, Racers Direct, and a whole lot of other ones that I know I'm forgetting because I am an 80s child. I grew up in the 80s and left most of my brain cells there because it was a freaking blast. Also, tonight's show is brought to you by the Creepy Kids over at the Lineup. Yes, those are our creepy little friends that travel all over the world and collect all these fantastic little horror memorabilia things, cool books, downloads, free subscriptions to horror channels, and man, you name it. If it's got anything to do with horror, they're going to be in your creepy crate. Want to know a little bit more about that? Go to AuthorLynnGibson.com. Check out the Creepy Crate logo there on the homepage, the top right-hand corner. You can see past crates, get a few little teasers on upcoming crates. There's Chris Seal. Glad to see you. Earl Shiffett. What is happening? Frank is in the house. Jerry's here. And Polly. Wow, we've got a good crowd jumping on board tonight. That's cool because I got all kind of crazy ghost legends rolling out. But let me finish telling you guys about the Creepy Crate. I don't know how they get so much merchandise crammed into these little boxes. I love getting mine every other month. There's all kind of crazy stuff in it. Like the mail lady doesn't even like to stop. She just kind of throws the box out and does a couple of these here things and hauls ass because it's scary even from the outside. You can't wait to see what's on the inside. Trust me, it could be t-shirts, visors, aprons, backpacks, all kinds of crazy horror memorabilia. And those folks over there at the lineup love us creepy kids because we have our own discount code. We're already getting one hell of a discount on this creepy crate box, way below retail value. But if you subscribe, make sure when you check out, type in the code TWISTED, and you're going to get an extra $5 off your subscription. How freaking sweet is that? Gavin said he was born in the 80s. Let's just not even go there, Gavin. Yes, I'm old. All right, so tonight we're kicking it off with a crazy little ghost legend. This is coming to us from St. Paul, Minnesota. We're talking about the Grigg's Mansion. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about that. It's not one of the more commercialized haunts, but pretty cool stuff going on there. So this joint here is still sitting on Summit Avenue in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it's surrounded by a whole bunch of other Civil War era estates. This mansion is massive. It's got like 10 bedrooms, a bunch of bathrooms. So yeah, you could have one hell of a party there. Anyway, it's still pretty much all original. It's very well preserved. It was named after the dude that built it, which was Chauncey W. Griggs. Now, Griggs was one of these Civil War officers that was also a grocery tycoon. And he had this massive and lavish hotel, or mansion, excuse me, built in 1883, but he only got to live in the place for like 4 years before he decided he was going to head west for other ventures. So the Griggs Mansion's got these beautiful wood paneled walls. It's got stained glass windows, and the original carriage house is still actually standing in the back. Now, in the late 1930s, this mansion was donated to a local art school that stayed there for 25 years. I'm bringing those guys up because they're the exception to the rule. These folks were the only ones that ever stayed in this mansion for any length of time. Most of those folks that have been in that house for the past century got the hell out of there really fast because it is said to be St. Paul's most haunted house. It's got several ghosts that hang out there. And of course, along with the ghosts comes a ton of paranormal activity that's going down there as well. So one of the most active ghosts that you can find there is a maid that worked there during the turn of the 20th century. Now, this chick supposedly committed suicide by hanging herself on the top floor landing because one of her love affairs had just went south, and apparently she couldn't deal with it because they didn't have Prozac back in the day. So her ghost was actually first spotted by another maid and a butler that worked there at the mansion back in the early 20th century, not too long after she actually killed herself. Her apparition has been seen there as a white mist ever since. Some people see her standing on the landing. Some people actually see her hanging there. A lot of people who've been in the area say that they can feel her presence whether they see her or not. They said there's this overwhelming sense of doom while you're standing there right around the landing where she bit it at. So another former employee also haunts the place. They hang out in the library. Charles Wade was the gardener there, and he was a little OCD like me. This dude spent hours upon hours in this library trying to figure out how to do his job better and how to be more outstanding than just the typical gardener that you'd run across. Now, his apparition is seen in this room, and he's heard in there pretty frequently too. You can walk in there, and even if you don't see him, the place can be just completely silent, but you can hear pages being flipped in a book when nobody else is around. So when this dude died, he was actually in the middle of a project out there in one of the massive gardens. So folks seem to think that he's hanging out there trying to get that last project knocked out because apparently he doesn't like leaving things half-assed done. Now, in 1964, Mr. Washke bought the mansion thinking he was going to use it as his home and his office. Well, that didn't work out so well for him. One night this dude is working at his desk in the library, and he looks up and he sees this man with a long face, a white hat, and a dark suit who's just standing there glaring at him like he's pissed off from the doorway. So he starts staring back at the dude, and then all of a sudden he just faded into thin air. Well, later on, he had the home renovated. Now, we here at the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show knows what happens when you have one of these old houses renovated. The ghosties don't like it when you mess with their things. So, of course, things started to get really active there at the Grigg's mansion. And one of those examples was a window that just would not stay shut. It kept opening by itself. Usually it'd be the other case. Usually it'd be closing by itself because, you know, gravity and physics and all that kind of crazy stuff. But this dude was getting really frustrated with it. So he has the contractors nail the window shut. Well, the next morning he goes to check on it so he can gloat a little bit, and he finds that the window was wide open and all of the nails were laying on the floor right there underneath it. I see I got a few messages coming in. Let me see who else is joining in. Let's see. Gavin said, I'm not old. I'm still young at heart. Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate that. Yuri's in the house. He says, is this the basis of the haunting? No, actually, the Griggs house is not. We have covered that on a past show. If you'd like for me to recover that, shoot me a message, Yuri. I'd be happy to tell that tale again. It's very well worth hearing. Ronnie and Lori Owens are in the house. Sean Neal Sharp says, hi, honey. Hi, glad to see you, Sean. Terry Dupuis is in the house, and they say evening from Ontario, Canada. Hey, do you know my friend Gavin Williams? He's hanging around up there by you. There's John Barron. Glad to see you. He's always so polite. That's a Southern man for you. Hi, Miss Lynn. Hey, Mr. John, I'm glad to see you joining in tonight. Haven't seen you for a while. I know you've been busy, though. Okay, so in the early 1950s. Actually, let me backtrack. There's one more ghost that I wanted to tell you about. He's kind of like the exact opposite of the other ghost that Mr. Wanky saw staring at him from the doorway of his office. This dude is an old dude with white hair who wears a black suit and black top hat. Now, he's been seen documented all over inside the mansion as well as outside the mansion. As far as I could find, no EVPs have ever been caught with him, but there have been several photographs that have popped up from time to time and spanning quite a bit of time as well. So he's been photographed off and on for a very, very long time there. Now, in the 1950s, this dude, Dr. Delmore Call, decided he was going to join the art school staff. So he moves into one of the front basement apartments there inside the mansion. Well, one night, this dude wakes up with cold fingers pressed on his forehead. So he jumps up out of bed, and before he could turn the light on, he sees this blue flash, and it just suddenly disappeared. Well, 2 nights later, he gets woke up again, and he jumps up again and runs for the light, but before he could get to the light, he encounters a man in a black top hat standing at the foot of his bed. They said as soon as each of them made eye contact with each other, the dark figure then turned away and walked through the brick wall. Pretty freaking creepy, huh? Now, so back to the art school. These students here were always complaining that it felt like somebody was standing right over their shoulder and watching everything they did. If you're an artist, that makes you kind of freaking nervous, right? Well, there was nobody there, or at least nobody they could see anyhow. So they thought that this was probably the spirit of that maid that committed suicide on the same floor, because they're on the top floor. As a matter of fact, it was the art school that had this massive skylight installed, and that's one of the biggest features with the mansion these days. A lot of people go there to check out the stained glass windows and this massive skylight, as well as all the ghosties that hang out there. So when the art school moved out of the mansion to their new building, the staff was actually relieved that they didn't have to put up with these weird feelings and the sensation that somebody was staring over their shoulder 24/7. Now, there's one story in particular that I ran across that's pretty freaking cool, and it's still making its rounds today. There were these 3 doubter journalists from St. Paul Pioneer Press. that decided they were going to load up and spend the night in the Griggs mansion one night in 1969 to do research for an article. They were basically there to quash all the legends that the mansion was haunted. So these dudes set up on the top floor where the maid killed herself. It was been 50 years earlier at this point. So by 4 a.m., these three wannabe badass men are hauling ass from the joint, screaming like little girls. They said they kept hearing these heavy footsteps on the stairs headed towards the upper floor. So one of them actually nutted up and went out onto the staircase to see what the hell was going on, right? Well, he starts screaming that there was something standing there by him. Something, not somebody. So he's running back towards the room, and as he passes the door, he didn't even stop. The other two file in behind him, and they haul ass, and they actually, all three left by the outside stairs and left all their gear and everything inside the house. Now, the folks that have recently owned this place didn't really broadcast all the paranormal stuff that's going on there, but none of them really stuck around for very long either. So Grigg's Mansion was put on the market in 2012, and it still has not sold. The price was reduced from $1.8 million to $1.1 million. See, folks, I think they need a realtor over there that will advertise and market the haunted history, because really, you know, that's just me. But anyway, this home is already a moneymaker. I don't know why somebody wouldn't invest that little $1.1 million in it, but it does have apartments that are there that you can rent out for an income of somewhere around 60 grand a year. That's some pretty good money. But of course, you have to find tenants that are willing to stay there. And then again, you could charge admission year-round, because haunted houses make a ton of money in October. But this house is haunted year-round. You could charge admission every single day. I'm just saying. Anyway, the apartments have ghost stories of their own, too. Now, in 1959, 3 students moved into one of these basement apartments. And one night, one of them wakes up in the middle of the night and sees the head of a child floating over his bed. Now, other students that have stayed in these apartments claim they were constantly being woke up in the middle of the night by somebody shaking them. Yeah, it might actually be a little bit difficult to keep tenants there, wouldn't you think? There's Jamie Rodriguez in the house. Hello, Jamie. Glad to see you. Are his hair long? I don't know about his hair. Yuri said the dude with the top hat, I mean. No, that is still not part of the haunting. Anthony Camp. Hey, Anthony, so enjoyed spending some time with you this weekend. David Ortega. Hello, honey. Glad to see you. Earl Shiffett says hello from Cocoa, Florida. I know where Cocoa Beach is. I had some relatives that live there. A friend of ours, Steve Kurtz, has a certified ghost hunter. Oh, that's freaking awesome. David Gassaway, glad to see you joining on board. There's Cody Hollers. Good God, hadn't seen you in forever. I thought you were dead. I thought I'd be telling Cody Hollers ghost stories here soon. I'm glad to see you joining in, though. And Gavin said, I would love to own a few haunted buildings. You and me both, Gavin. Frank Billings, hi, glad to see you. And there's Scott Singer. Thank you so much for joining in this evening. Okay, so next up, this is kind of, I don't know, maybe like a Waffle House deal I wanted to tell you guys about. It's called the Harvey House, but it's not like a house. Actually, I'm going to tell a story about a Harvey House tonight, but it was like a chain. It's like a fine dining / hotel chain, but not as much of a hotel as it was a dining establishment, maybe shopping and general store, kind of like a mini mall back in the day. Something along those lines anyway. But it's got a crazy haunted history behind it. So this dude, Fred Harvey, realized that there was a lack of decent places for railroad passengers to eat. So he goes and he pitches his idea to the big railroad industry back then in the day. And of course, a little while later, Harvey houses were being built all over the place. 84 of them, as a matter of fact. Now, a cool little footnote here, folks. The Harvey House is where the Blue Plate lunch special actually started. How cool is that, right? That's where it became a thing at, y'all. Anyway, these Harvey houses were all built to conform to the culture of the areas that they were in. So one of the first Harvey houses is still in Barstow, California, and it's called the Casa del Desordo. It was built in 1908 by the AT&SF Railroad Company, so their passengers would have a decent place to eat and stay over and pick up the necessities or whatever the case may be. Today it's used as a museum, but there are also ghost hunts there because this joint is crazy haunted, y'all. So back in the day, the waitress staff was known as Harvey girls. Now, these chicks were between 18 and 25 years old, and they were handpicked very selectively by management. Every single girl in the area wanted to grow up and be a Harvey girl. It was a huge thing back then. Kind of like being a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, with the exception of the fact that there were some pretty strict rules that governed these Harvey girls. They had a 10 o'clock curfew that they had to adhere to every single day of the year, which meant no partying during holidays or birthdays. Scratch that, that's out. Their black and white uniforms had to be pressed before every shift. Now, keep in mind, there wasn't no GE steam irons back in the day either, so that right there was a task in itself. Now, one of these Harvey girls was named Rachel, and she worked at the Casa del Cierto back in the 1920s. Well, folks say that she's still hanging around the old depot today. She's seen near where the formal dining room was located back then. And witnesses say that they see her taking orders from customers that aren't there. So she's also been seen walking from the kitchen area holding some unidentifiable object. I think I need some naked wines because my words are getting all jumbled up. That's going to help, right? Okay. So there's been several pictures taken of her. She's holding something in her hand, but you can't tell what it is. I have no idea what it is. I've seen the picture. It just looks like kind of a blur. Maybe it's actually an order pad or something along those lines, but I don't really know what it is. So there's a fairly recent story there that's still making her rounds. It says she's being spotted on the balcony there at the Casa. Now, folks seem to think that that's where she was sitting there watching and waiting for her fiance to return from war. Apparently, she spent a whole lot of time there back in the day, and legend has it that she threw herself from that very same balcony when she realized that he was never coming back. So also in the Casa lobby, there's another female ghost that's seen there, but this is a ghost of a little girl, and her name is Emily. Folks say that she likes to play peekaboo with the visitors near the staircase there. And sometimes if she decides she's taking a liking to you, she'll follow you upstairs and kind of hang out with you while you're there. Now, there's another spirit that hangs out there too. It's a man that's known by the name of Buchanan. You know he's around when you smell cigarette smoke. Now, this dude he didn't die there in the depot. He died on the grounds. He was actually crushed to death between two railroad cars right there in the rail yard. So legend has it that his last request before he died was to see his family one last time, and he wanted a cigarette. So there you go. You know, when you smell that cigarette smoke, Buchanan is somewhere hanging around you. Now, besides the ghosts that still hang out there, there's all kind of paranormal activity because those two things go hand in hand, right? A lot of visitors have experienced a rapid change in temperature. Now, we already know that when you feel cold spots, I mean, something's going on right there. But the weird thing with this is sometimes the temperature will drop and sometimes the temperature will go up. There's a variance of 20 to 70 degrees in these temperature fluctuations. That's the first time I've ever really seen where people are reporting that the temperature actually rises when there's paranormal activity going on. That's kind of crazy right there. But they say that it happens really fast. So if you're not on your toes and not standing there with some kind of equipment to document it, you might actually miss it. Charles Hopkins joined. Cody Holler said, sorry, baseball season. Yeah, I got you. There's my girl, Susie. Been worried sick about you. Hope everything is going well. Yuri said, houses built by Harvey. That's exactly right. Eris, glad to see you joining on board tonight. And there's Bells as well. Thank you so much for jumping on board. Teresa Campbell, hey, how glad to see you. Hadn't seen you in a while. Been missing you, girl. Eris is going, yes, I don't know what that is, but that's awesome. Same thing from Bells. Okay, y'all are really messing with my head. Stephen Beth Martin, hi, watching from the UK. That's freaking awesome. Love it when you guys chime in, tell me where you're at. Love to know where all of the fans are at. That's freaking crazy. I love it. Let's see. Gavin says, what part of the UK? Oh, you guys are talking. That's freaking great. Hey, Sophie. Hi, Lynn. Just wanted to pop in for a second. See you soon. Looking forward to it. There is Lazarus. Thank you so much. One of those compliments that I won't be sharing with everybody right off the bat. All kind of crazy stuff. Lawrence, I've been missing you. Hope everything is going well with you over there in the Crescent City. All kind of folks are chiming in tonight. This is freaking cool. I'm digging it. They're going too fast for me to catch. My eyes don't move that fast. Okay, so anyway, there's also, besides the temperature fluctuations, there's people are hearing voices of children and adults, of course, and plenty of visitors there have seen shadows or dark figures lurking around all over the place, not in any one spot in particular. Now, people who are sensitive like me that visit there have also reported feeling chills on the back of their neck and on their hands, and tingling sensations on their arms. And other folks have reported feeling very uncomfortable and becoming dizzy or lightheaded or even nauseated. And those may be some of the after effects of how some of these people may have passed away there on those grounds. So always keep that in mind when this weird feeling takes you over and you know you're in a haunted joint. Maybe do a little bit of research and find out exactly how those folks did it right there. Okay, so there is also another hotel that I wanted to tell you guys about. Not a Harvey House. This is the La Concha Hotel in Key West. And if you didn't get the blue, so yeah, you're not going to get the blue plate special there. But you might see all kinds of crazy ghosts hanging around there. The La Concha was actually opened in the 1920s, and it was the host of a ton of famous folks back then. It very rapidly became the playground for U.S. presidents, gangsters, European royalty, and a whole slew of other well-known players back in the day. Now, it was renovated back in the 1980s, and again, we all know what happens when an old joint like this is renovated. Yep, the ghosties started stirring around. 3 of them there are extremely prominent, and I'm going to tell you about those 3 ghosties. One of them is believed to be the spirit of Ernest Hemingway. I know you guys know that name, right? Because he's seen there in the suite where he stayed with his mistress, Martha Gellhorn, who actually became his 3rd wife back in the 1930s. Now, Hemingway started writing his 1937 novel, To Have and Have Not, right there in that very suite at the La Concha. His ghost is said to be fairly mischievous because he doesn't like anybody in his space. He's very well known for moving the guest stuff around in the room, whether they're watching or not. This one poor bastard in particular that stayed in Hemingway's old suite wound up rather pissed off by the middle of the night. So this dude had just climbed into bed on his first night there, and he looks up and he sees his video recorder unexplainably fall off the dresser. So he's in bed, he gets up, he turns the light on, he figures out, well, I guess I just didn't set it down right or whatever. So he picks it up and he puts it on the shelf right there next to the dresser. Well, the dude crawls back into the bed, and as soon as he settles, the camera falls off the shelf. So he gets up again and he checks the dresser and he checks the shelf. He wanted to see if they were wobbly or leaning or whatever the case may be, but everything was all good. They were solid. Nothing was wobbling. So he carefully sets the camera back on the dresser, turns the light out, and lays back down. But this time, he kept his eyes glued on that camera. Well, all of a sudden, he looks up and he sees this dark figure in the corner there by the bathroom, and it's kind of crouched down like it's hiding. I don't know where a dark shadow would feel like it needed to hide in the darkness, but it was. So he's sitting there watching the shadow, and all of a sudden it starts drifting from that corner and across the room, and then guess what? The camera falls off the dresser again. So this dude jumps out of bed, flips the light back on, looks around, and he sees that there ain't nobody in that room with him. So at that point, he packs his shit up and goes back downstairs and makes them put his ass in another room. So there's this other ghost that's actually spotted there at the La Concha. This is ghost number 2 that's very prominent there. This is the ghost of a lawyer who was having a little bit of legal problems back in the 1980s. Not quite as old as Hemingway's ghost, but hey, we'll take it, right? So this dude was being investigated for embezzlement and fraud, and he knew he was fixing to spend some time in jail. So he comes up with this plan to commit suicide, but he was going to make it look like murder so his family could collect the insurance and he didn't have to worry about him. He knew they'd be taken care of. So this dude makes this long rambling recording of all these bullshit statements that actually implicated his secretary in his demise. This dude was saying that she'd sent somebody to assassinate him. So thinking that he's got his act all flawlessly laid out, the dude jumps from one of the hotel balconies while he's recording his screams as he fell to his death. Dude thought he had his shit pretty well worked out. Kind of sounded that way, but apparently there was some other things going on because his little plot failed to clear his name and he was absolutely no help to his family. The authorities had way too much evidence on him, and since his bizarre death, many of the guests have seen him walking frantically back and forth on the same balcony that he jumped from. Now, several of these folks have actually even called the hotel security thinking they were fixing to watch somebody jump to their death, right? Well, security rushes up to the balcony, but by the time they get there, of course, this dude has vanished into thin air. One time, there was actually this couple that was sitting in their room. They pulled their curtains open. They're just chilling back there and watching the sunset. And all of a sudden, they see this body fall past their window. So they freak the hell out and they call the front desk and looking for security because somebody has just jumped from the balcony, and surely enough, they're spattered all over the highway right there in front of the hotel, right? So security runs outside the hotel, walking back and forth underneath the balcony, looking in the streets, and there's nothing there. You would think that since 1980, that they would have caught on by now that nobody's jumping. That shit has already happened. There will be no blood stains on the concrete today. I know, bummer, right? Let's see who else is joining in. Andrew Armstrong. Cheers, Andrew. Right back at you, honey. Got my naked wines in the house. Spiro Einstein, glad to see you hanging out with us tonight. Gavin says, I have been looking into some stories about Liverpool. Oh, there's some crazy stuff there. Hey, give me a couple heads up. We'll do one of them on the show. There's Cheryl Ward. I'm glad to see you, honey. Hope all is well with you. Oh, ghost stories from Russia. You know, I do know about a very macabre serial killer from Russia. Yuri says, we've got a place where many soldiers died over the years. These stories were discouraged by the communists, though. Oh, that's where the Russia thing came in. But now communism is gone and the stories are resurfacing. I have found some crazy stuff there, but I have never done a segment on it. So, Yuri, I might need to look back into that and do something on an upcoming show. Hey, send me a message, Yuri. Tell me about some of these locations and some of the stories that are resurfacing, and I'll look into those, and we will do a segment on an upcoming show, and I'll give you a shout out live on the air. There is Joey Mariani, sorry, I made it. Hello, I'm glad you made it, Joey. It's been a while, but hey, you're joining in. We're only on like the second story of the night, so there's plenty of creepy still to come. Okay, so now the third most prominent ghost that hangs out here at this hotel is the tormented spirit of a waiter that worked there in the 1980s. See, folks, I told you the 80s were wild. Here's two ghosts, one suicide and one poor bastard that worked at this hotel that are still hanging out there today. Had to be something holding them there, right? So anyway, it's New Year's Eve. It's 1:45 in the morning, and this waiter is busting his ass to get back to the kitchen with a loaded cart. He was part of the cleanup crew behind one of the New Year's Eve parties, obviously, right? So he's got his cart all loaded down with party decorations and streamers and confetti and champagne glasses and empty bottles and whatever else he could pick up and load onto that cart. And he was on his way to the 5th floor elevator. Interesting, same floor, right? So he pushes the button and he hears the elevator door open. Well, he had his back to the door because, you know, those waiters, they pull their carts in. Well, when he stepped through the doors, the elevator was not there. It had malfunctioned and actually stopped on the 6th floor above him. And this dude fell 5 floors to his death. And add insult to injury or death, the freaking cart falls on top of him, the poor bastard. So anyway, the elevator, like I said, had malfunctioned. And of course, the hotel, not really wanting to advertise all that madness, kind of kept it quiet. But it didn't last for very long, because only weeks after this terrible accident happened, guests and staff there start seeing this dude. A lot of the employees that work on the 5th floor kept complaining that they felt like they were being watched. And some of them even claimed that something had tapped them on their shoulders when the hall was empty. There was nobody else there. So to this day, there are maids that absolutely refuse to work on that 5th floor unless they are sent there in groups. Now, this ghost is also seen in the hotel's kitchen, and the cooks there say that they see him pushing a cart into one of the corners of the room. Now, other folks there have found leftover streamers and confetti and all kind of party favors there on the 5th floor landing, right there by the elevator, when there had been no parties on the 5th floor. There's not even a holiday, ain't nothing going down, but all that stuff's left there. And as a matter of fact, there was this new janitor that was working there that nobody had really filled him in on the ghost story. He had just finished cleaning, and he walks by and he sees all the shit laying on the ground right there in front of the elevator. So he goes to get a vacuum cleaner and clean it up. He's all pissed off and everything. But by the time he gets back just a couple minutes later with the vacuum cleaner, all this stuff had vanished. It was not there anymore. A lot of the other staff members have reported that they'll leave their carts in one spot overnight, and the next morning they're missing. Well, they're not really missing. They all know to go up to the 5th floor right there near the elevator, and they'll find all their carts lined up nice and neat in a row. Guests have also reported hearing a squeaky cart pass their room late at night. And there have been some guests that actually encounter the waiter. They've looked up and see him walking down the hall, pushing his cart. And they say that he looks, he's very rigid in his movement. And he just kind of looks like he's dazed or stunned or something's going on with him. Well, this one guest in particular decided he was going to try to find out if he was okay. So he goes to approach him and he starts talking to him, and the waiter, of course, doesn't respond. So he's standing there, he's like, something's really wrong with this dude. And the waiter makes a corner, so the guest turns the corner around him, and as soon as he does, the waiter is vanished and there is no one there in the hall and nowhere for anyone to have gone. So I thought that was pretty cool. Another common complaint there is that the guests will call down at the front desk about being woke up about a party that's going down at the end of the hall. They claim that they can hear all kind of laughing and music and people talking and all kind of craziness going on. And of course, by the time somebody comes up there to investigate, it's dead silent. And of course, there's no freaking party going down there. Now today, if you want to go and check in and see if you can spot one of these resident ghosts, the La Concha is officially called the Crown Plaza Key West today. So heads up, there is a tour of haunted Key West landmarks that actually starts right there in the lobby of this hotel. It's also still the tallest building on the civilian side of Key West, and it is on the National Register of Historic Places. So pretty cool little footnotes right there. Let me catch up on my side notes here on Facebook. Gavin says, when I find a good story, I'll message it to you. Good, please do that. Andrew said, I painted a portrait of a raven for you. Oh, that's freaking awesome, Andrew. Thank you. I love ravens. You know, some people like doves. I like ravens. Stephen Waltz, is it weird watching you with my pants off? Maybe so, Stephen. You might need some meds or some counseling or something. Let's see who else is chiming in, because obviously I don't want to turn into a counselor tonight, and I don't have enough crazy pills to go around. Yes, Gavin, you were born in a crazy decade. Herc Stewart says, hello, first time watching you. I'm so glad you're joining us, Herc. I hope you enjoy the stream. We've got all kind of crazy haunted stuff going on. Teresa says, me too. Do you think it was crazy before us, or did you make it crazy? I might have contributed just a tad, Teresa. There are still people talking about the legend of Lynn Gibson. Let's see. Somebody's telling me to watch out for the little guy behind me in the corner. The little guy's okay. He watches out for me. All right, that got me caught up there. So we've got another ghost legend to talk about. Shocked? No, of course you're not here. Let me grab my naked ones. I hear my little Hannibal downstairs raising hell. Hannibal the man-eater, my pit bull puppy. All right, so we're rolling on. This is a rather old legend, and you might have heard this one. I've actually run across it a couple of times, but I found a few more details on it, so I went ahead and did another segment on it. This is the legend of Sarah's unlucky soldier. Now, by 1862, the Civil War had left a massive trail of blood and corpses all across the United States. But in the state of Missouri, the Confederate resistance was pretty much over after the Battle of Pea Ridge in Arkansas. So after that, General Henry Halleck led his Union troops up to the city of Columbia, and they were pretty much taking over everything and, of course, ransacking whatever was left over. But this story in particular went down in 1862 at the Senior Hall of the Columbia Baptist Female College, which today is known as Stevens College. So yes, it's still there. Yes, it's still haunted. You should visit if you're anywhere in the area. So at this time was a finishing school for young Southern women. Now, Sarah June Wheeler was a student at this college, and one evening she'd entered a room to witness this ragged Confederate soldier crawling in through a window. Now, back in these days, it wasn't so off the wall to see a Union soldier crawling in through a window because, you know, they were breaking in, stealing, and ransacking, and raping, and pillaging, and whatever they could. But this time it was a Confederate soldier, and there really weren't supposed to be any Confederate soldiers in the area unless they were prisoners or corpses. So this poor bastard staggers across the room, and just as the chick goes to scream, he grabs her and he slaps his hand over her mouth with his hand. So she starts struggling to get away from him, and as soon as she starts putting up a fight, this dude passes out on the floor right there in front of her. So right about that time, Sarah's roommate, Margaret Baker, walks into the room, but she didn't freak out when she saw the uniform because she was a loyal Southerner and she'd been born and raised in Arkansas. Now, this chick had been attending the college because her father paid her tuition with slaves that were sent there to work at the college laundry. So after a few minutes, they figure out that this soldier's wounded and he's still bleeding. Well, they tended to his wounds and they called for a couple of servants and told them to send up food. And then they warned those servants to keep their mouth shut and not say anything. So this soldier, Corporal Isaac Johnson from Mississippi, told them that he had fought in the Battle of Pea Ridge until he had been captured. He managed to escape and he'd been on the run at night and he was hiding out during the day. Well, he had plans of getting his revenge on General Haley. He was going to assassinate him because his father had been killed in Grant Hackett, Nashville. So both of these girls agreed to keep him their little secret. Well, Sarah starts spending a lot of time with him, and she's taking care of his wounds and making sure he had, something to eat and talking to him. And, they spent a lot of time talking, like several hours a day. So apparently they were just talking, maybe they were doing other things, but the legend says they were talking, so we'll keep it wholesome at this point. So yeah, anyway, it wasn't very long before they both fall head over heels in love with each other. Well, eventually somebody found out about their little secret, and those little whispers made their way to General Halleck's staff's ears. Well, they were pissed when they found out that there was a Confederate soldier being hidden at this local college. So Halleck pays a visit to Dr. Herbert Williams, which was the president of the college at that time. And he warns him that if he found out that those rumors were true, he was going to close down that school. And probably that meant back in the day he was going to close it down, burn it down, and everything else. So anyway, Dr. Williams gets into a freaking panic. And he calls a gathering of all the students together, and he's demanding to know that if anybody knows anything about a Confederate soldier, they better step up right now and start talking. Well, Sarah finds out what's going on, and she hauls ass back to her room, and she's thinking it's best if she asks Johnson to surrender himself. Well, she gets there to find out that the corporal had a whole nother plan going on. He had stolen a suit from Dr. Williams' closet. And he told her that he had intended to escape to Canada. See, it could have been a Canada legend there, Gavin, using this suit as a disguise. But before they could even leave a room, a crowd starts gathering around the building, and some of them start trickling up there to the door. So the general caught on to what was happening, and he and his men went with Dr. Williams to Sarah's door, where they were informed that that soldier was inside that room. So Halleck was pissed out of his skull. He turns to the president and he tells him that all of the female students needed to pack up and be gone by the next morning. Well, Johnson, who's standing on the other side of the door, hears this and he decides he'd go ahead and surrender. So Dr. Williams was able to convince Halleck that he didn't have any idea about this soldier being there, and he begged and he pleaded and he hollered and he cried, and eventually Halleck went ahead and let him keep the school open. But things didn't end so well for Corporal Johnson. Now, since he was found in civilian clothes behind enemy lines, they considered his ass a spy. And 3 days later, he was shot by a firing squad on the street right there in front of the college. Now, legend states that Sarah was so devastated when she found out that she killed herself by jumping out of a window. So since then, a lot of folks say that she's still haunting the senior hall, which was the only dorm on campus back then in 1918, or until 1918, excuse me. Her spirit has been seen and heard in this building, and supposedly she's still there looking for her lost love, Corporal Johnson. So a ton of students over the years have gone up to the bell tower in this hall and held seances trying to communicate with Sarah, even though the bell tower wasn't actually built until after the Civil War era. Well, check this out. In 1971, a reporter by the name of Gassaway had heard of some creepy stories that were coming out of this dorm about Sarah. So he pays a visit to the senior hall one Halloween thinking he's going to get one hell of a story. He did. So this group of instructors and students, accompanied by him, made their way to the bell tower. Now the group, minus the reporter, entered the room and placed their candles on the floor. Well, within seconds, the door slams shut and the candles go out. Well, this one student goes apeshit crazy, and then all of a sudden she faints. And the meanwhile, Gasway shows up outside the door, and he's beating on the door, pulling and jerking on it, and can't get the door to open. So all of a sudden, he looks down the hall, and he sees this man in a Confederate uniform and a woman in a long dress. Here's an excerpt from the article that he wrote about his ghostly experience. I'm going to read it verbatim. There was the sound of slow steps at first. When they stopped, deep breathing became audible. I waited for the person to come through the door, and I waited, and I waited. Finally, I took the initiative, hauled myself from the floor, and moved to the hallway's mouth. Halfway down the hall, I see the figure of a man in a uniform. Then the swish of a woman's long skirt caught my eye as the man dropped into a half crouch, his left hand outstretched as if to ward something off. Then both figures disappeared down the stairs quickly. Pretty cool, huh? Well, check this out. Later on, there was a major renovation there back in the 1990s that turned the dorm into classrooms for music and dance students. Now, even though there were major alterations made to the building, the ghost of Sarah and her soldier are still seen hanging out there today. All right, I've got one more legend for you guys tonight. Let me catch up on my notes here on the side. I don't want to hear from the dude that's watching me with his pants off. You're even creepier than I am. You got some deep-seated issues. There's something wrong with your frontal lobe. Donna Patton says she loves that story. Is this what I normally do? Yes, it is. 24/7. I am your friendly neighborhood creepy chick. He might run up to see you again. Yes, he might very well, being he's a Mississippi boy, huh? Let's see. Okay, I take your word for it. It is the creepiest ghost story from Russia. Yes, please send me that. Teo, glad to see you. Thanks for joining in. Hi, Josie. I like you too, sweetheart. Let's see. Cassandra's here. I made it. I'm so glad you did, baby. We enjoyed spending some time with you this weekend. Hope that we can do that again real soon somewhere in the near future, maybe at a crazy horror con coming up. Okay, so the last story for tonight. You know, I got to get me one more swig of my naked wines for this one. We're rolling. We got some pretty cool ghost legends tonight, huh? All right, so next up is another college ghost, kind of. Ever hear of Michigan's Mackinac Island? Yeah, me neither. Apparently, it's around the western tip of Lake Huron, and that's where you'll find the Mission Point Resort, which is considered one of the most haunted areas on the island. Now, the Moral Rearmament Movement built the buildings that make up this resort back in the 1950s, and it was used as the international headquarters for this spiritual group, which was aimed at world peace. Needless to say, that shit didn't last for very long. So in 1966, the buildings were donated to the Mackinac College, which was a 4-year grad school that only graduated one class in 1970. Again, needless to say, that shit didn't last for very long. So the property's been used as a resort and hotel since the 1970s. Now, the resort's most famous ghost was a student that actually was at that college. And his ghost is nicknamed Harvey. And apparently, this dude is a pretty big guy. Now, according to the legend, this dude fell in love with a chick there. And he asked her to marry him, but she shut his ass down quick, fast, and in a hurry. That tramp shattered him. So after that, he goes off into the woods in the bluffs behind the hotel and he kills himself. Well, folks noticed that he was missing sometime in February, but nobody found his body until the following July. So some folks suspected that he'd been murdered, though, because they did find his corpse. And when they did, they realized that there were 2 gunshot wounds to his head, and the gun was nowhere to be found. There's a theory that another student was involved in his death, but the cause of death remains officially a suicide. So don't feel bad for him, because at least he's not lonely in his afterlife. There's more than just that one ghost floating around here at the old resort. Now, at the resort's theater, there's another spirit. It's another dude that likes to flirt with women, and he's a practical joker with men. He's been known to pinch and poke chicks while they're sitting in the theater. His apparition has been seen frequently there in the theater, but also all over at several other locations around the resort. Now, many of the paranormal groups that have been there have picked up EVPs of this dude's voice in the theater, along with the sound of a woman humming or singing. So, other folks that are heard at the Mission Point include a child that's often heard calling for its parents, and several Native Americans have been seen wandering around the grounds. Check this out. Archaeologists have determined that there was a tribe there that had been drawn to the area because of the prime fishing back in 900 AD. These were the first inhabitants of the island. Now, these Native Americans considered Mackinac sacred, and they used this area to bury their tribal leaders. But by the time the first Europeans stumbled upon the island in the mid-1600s, it was deserted. So the French then settled on the island, and later on the British took control of it in 1780, and they established Fort Mackinac. Now, not long after that, the Treaty of Paris gave the island to the Americans. Well, during the War of 1812, the British captured the island, and once more, despite bloody attempts by the Americans to take it back, they held on to it. Well, after the War of 1815, the Treaty of Ghent put the island firmly back in the Americans' hands. So with all that being said, there's one hell of a history that's gone down right here on this little island. So after the Civil War, Mackinac turns into a tourist hotspot. After Yellowstone, it was made America's second national park. Now, things haven't changed a whole lot since then. There's still no bridge to access the island, and if you're going there, your ass is getting on a ferry or a boat, because cars are not allowed there, even today. A lot of folks believe that that's why a lot of the ghosts have stuck around, because the joint still looks the same as it did back then when they had a pulse. So now the most famous and perhaps the most haunted building there on the island is the Grand Hotel. Now, when this hotel was first being built, construction workers unearthed a shit ton of human bones. In fact, there were so many that they didn't know what the hell to do with them. So they put them all back in the hole, and they built the hotel on top of them. Yeah, there's a massive gravesite under the Grand Hotel. So one story in particular is about two of the ghosts that are spotted there. These two maintenance men were checking on some electrical issues, probably a ghost, right there at the theater, at the stage. So they get there and they encounter some kind of crazy, creepy, dark entity. They said they felt like somebody or something was watching them. So they're all looking around and everything, and they glance across the stage and they see this dark black mass with red glowing eyes staring straight at them. So they're both freaking the hell out. But before they could even think about getting the hell out of there, this dark mass charges toward them. It plows into one of these dudes with such an impact that he knocked the dude the hell out. So later on, when he came to in the hospital, he refused to go back to the Grand. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't even go back to quit. He sent in his letter of termination via a friend of his. Quit. Not going back. Thank you very much. So after that, other folks have spotted the ghost of a man wearing a top hat in the second floor piano bar. They say this dude just kind of meanders around for a minute and then he disappears. After this dude is spotted, witnesses claim that they smell cigar smoke. Now, some of the staff here at the hotel have had some pretty freaky encounters with a woman dressed in Victorian clothing. They say that she is haunting the employee housing. Now, a lot of these people who've encountered her said that they were laying down in bed and all of a sudden they were woke up for no reason, and they see this chick in this Victorian clothing coming into their room. She climbs into the bed with them and curls up around them. This is actually the first story that I've ran across where there is a ghost that spoons. Also, there's Fort Mackinac, where the ghosts of many soldiers have been spotted walking there along the Rifle Range Trail. A lot of folks have claimed to see piles of amputated limbs right there in the old hospital, and then all of a sudden they just disappear. Now, it's also said that here at the fort, a lot of the furniture likes to move around by itself. And there's at least 13 child ghosts that have been seen and heard and documented here. Legend has it that these kids were all victims of typhoid fever and tuberculosis, and their cries are still heard today, echoing the halls of the buildings where they once lived. Then there's this cool little spot that's somewhere between Mission Point Resort and downtown Mackinac. There's this 20-foot drop-off of a cliff, and down below it's this pretty little pond that they call the Drowning Pool, and it's got its own haunted little history. The pool is where women accused of witchcraft were tortured. These chicks worked in the brothels that sprang up there on the island in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And they were accused of witchcraft, probably by some pissed off wives, because they were supposedly luring all these wholesome and godlike men to these houses of ill repute where they had sex with these prostitutes. Yes. Always the woman's fault, right? Well, anyway, somebody decided they were going to put an end to all these hookers running around and corrupting these wholesome men of the island. So these chicks were all rounded up and rocks were tied around their ankles and they were thrown into this lagoon. And if they sank, of course, they were considered innocent, but of course they were very dead, just like King James's witchcraft tests, right? So now this pool is said to be haunted by some of those victims. And folks have actually witnessed shadows rising from the water. And these shadows, oddly enough, never make any noise or cause any ripples. But that's not all that's seen there. There are some witnesses that report seeing these huge splashes in the area. And they say it's probably something pretty big that's making these splashes. I think that's probably something residual from these chicks being thrown in there with these rocks around their ankles. That's my thoughts anyway. Let's see who else is joined on before I let everybody go. There's my boy, Brandon. I told you the wrong date on that show. It's not October 9th, Brandon. It's going to be the week after that, but it is going to be one hell of a show right there with the Cripple Creek area. Back from Victor Hotel, another week. Place is definitely haunted and worth visiting. I hope you had some groovy experiences there. Where is this hotel? Teresa, the one that I think you might be talking about was in Key West. Let's see, Gavin said, I had a feeling the island might have something to do with Indians. Yeah, definitely. Ernesto Falcon says, what makes that coat move behind you in the corner? Well, actually, it's not a coat, Ernesto, but what makes it move is probably the 4 masks that you see hanging on the wall. Hey, Sammy, glad to see you. Did you get a chance to go back and check out the show where we did the segment on William Granser Harrison, I think was the last name? That was a pretty cool little show. Cassandra said the masks on the wall to the left actually have attached to them. They could be playing with the skeleton in the corner. Yeah, frequently. I told you about those masks. They're kind of crazy. She told us this awesome story about them this past weekend. Yeah, definitely. Glad you actually got a chance to see them up to some mischief. It's October. I have a feeling they're going to be up to a lot of mischief this month. Teresa said, I would love to hear the story about the mask. I will definitely do that. I'm out of time this week. Teresa, tune in next week and I will go over that with you, with all you guys so y'all know about it. Ernesto said, ladies that service the dirty rich guy, ugly men of the time. You're probably right, and their ugly wives were probably pretty pissed. Hey, Christina, glad you're joining in for the first time, catching us at the last part of the show. Go back and check out the first part of the show. We had some pretty good Ghost Legends tonight. My boy Freddie said, I hate it that I won't be able to come to Gulf Coast Fan Fest. You and me both, Freddie. I was looking forward to seeing you. That sucks. All right, so yes, upcoming on not this weekend, but weekend after next, Gulf Coast Fan Fest. So if you are anywhere near the Biloxi area, come and hang out with us. Dude, the guest list is freaking phenomenal for this con. There are celebrities out the yin yang, and of course we will be there with the Adrian's Fury Dragster. Ecto-1 will be there, and Bill Gibson will be there with the Christine movie car. That's going to be awesome. We get to hang out with our friends Bill and Susie and Mike, keepers of the Christine movie car. In the meanwhile, oh yeah, definitely at the end of the month, we will be in E-Town, Kentucky for Night Risers, another free killer horror con. Looking forward to that. It is Vampire Christmas. Loving it. October is definitely Mama's month. All right, folks, so if you can't wait till next Tuesday to get your creepy on, go to authorlyngibson.com where you can check out my books, my blogs, my Facebook page, pictures from past events, and all the way over to the far right, you will see a tab for The Edge Radio US. If you like your rock hot and killer, yeah, we got that for you. Check us out. There's a link there where you can stream live, and another link, if you have an Android device, there is a free app so you can take your hot ass rock with you wherever you go. Check us out. Make sure to download the app. John Wright, glad to see you catching us at the end of the show. Johnny, please go back and check out the first part of the show. Lots of crazy stuff you missed out on. Hopefully we will see you next week at 7 Central, 8 Eastern, right here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen stream. Until then, kiddos, y'all keep it creepy, because you know I will.